Okay, good morning. We're glad that you're here, and we've been praying about this day for the last 2-3 months, planning for it, and today you're here, and we're so glad, and I forgot to turn off the music, but it's nice to have background music. It's kind of like when the theme music building in a movie or something. Some of you I know, some of you I don't, so let me introduce myself. I am Pastor Don Keel, the Director of Young Adult Ministries for the Georgia-Cumberland Conference. I also have Adventist Christian Fellowship. How many of you have never heard about Adventist Christian Fellowship? Anybody not know what that is? Some of you I told beforehand, so you now know, so you can keep your hand down and say, yeah, I know. But there were some that didn't. But Adventist Christian Fellowship is our ministry on secular campus, university campuses, to our Adventist students. We have ACF chapters in 12 locations around the conference, and if you try to go to all of them, it's about 3,000 miles of driving, so time you do the big loop. And we're going to be adding more in the next few years. It's an exciting group to work with. Last February, I knew nothing about ACF. I can't say nothing. I knew it existed, and I was on the board at Advent House at UTK. That's the only thing I knew about ACF. And then at the end of February, they handed me this job title and said, okay, go. And 2 weeks later, I actually held my first ACF Connect convention at Cahata. And we have an ACF sponsor here today, which is good. Danny and Emily are very deeply involved with the Kennesaw chapter. But today we're talking about what do we do? How do we attract, engage, and mobilize young adults? Now, you've come from all over the conference hoping to find the magic bullet, I know. That will suddenly turn things around for your church, and suddenly young adults will just flow in, and it'll be awesome. Let me just say at the outset, we don't have a magic bullet, because I don't think it exists. So I just want to deal with that expectation up front. Be totally clear, no one does. It doesn't exist. What we do have, though, are what we consider to be some common sense, practical suggestions that can at least help you take a look at your church community and see where you might make some changes. Now, you did a poll, and we're going to look at the poll here. If I can get this thing to, I don't know if you can get that to work. 22 has responded to the poll. That's excellent. I hope you get used to Slido because we're going to use it all day long, if we can get it to work right. Okay, so let's look at the MC1 poll results. Okay. There we go. Let's see if that can. When you think of what it takes to attract, engage young adults, what one-word concepts come to mind? You can put more than one. This is called a word cloud. Notice the words that are bigger are the ones that got put down more times. I think involvement wins. Okay? Community, loving, fun, fellowship, realism, active, friendship, relaxed, transparency, relate, potential, meet, longevity, excitement, inclusion, active belonging, authentic, honest, and so forth. So as you look at that, you can see a lot of things come to mind, but involvement is definitely one of the key ones. Which do you think is more important to attracting young adults, type of worship service or community? Good answer. Good answer. I'm glad we got the brightest among you here today. That's awesome, because that's exactly right. Okay? Let's move to the next one. What do you think is the biggest obstacle to young adult ministry happening in your church, and why? Lack of community and engagement, knowing how to draw them in from the community, no young adult leadership, not enough leaders to get out and bring them home, lack of organization, lack of effective leadership, lack of programs, lack of progressive thinking, lack of active outreach. And let me see if I can get the rest of this to show, because you guys went crazy on this. I'll just read them off of here. There's a gap between youth ministry, Pathfinder, Sabbath School Adventures, and the ministries that attract older adults with established families. There needs to be something action-oriented for young adults to do. When they visit, there needs to be something readily available that demands the skills and talents they've been blessed with. Smiles and conversations about remember when just don't cut it. That's a good one. Also, we're so status quo with regards to ministries that adults join that there is nothing that presents as a challenge for young adults to be drawn to. Double bind Christianity. Attraction, traditional and contemporary are not attention getters, almost no young people. Stagnant worship styles, attitudes of members and negative history within our church, lack of understanding from current leadership of the young adult mindset. Nothing for them to take ownership of. Involvement, time, family, their willingness to participate, community of young adults, no program for them, collaboration with the older generation for united church growth. Older ones sometimes put pressure for the younger ones to do something to help the church as a whole, but the younger generation may have cultural tendencies to generate independent success. Commitment because they're not connected and involved, a lack of communication. The size of the church attracts many young adults in the area, but because of the size and the nature of young adult life and schedule, it's hard to get to know everyone and get everyone engaged in the same projects. Y'all got a different problem than most of us. That's good. Understanding what is relevant to them. Routine rigidity. They don't feel like they belong. And worship styles. Whew, you guys went to town on that one. That's good. What are some things you tried in your church that failed in seeking to minister to, with, or for young adults? Things that you tried that failed. Fellowship activities. Tried to host a Bible study at my house. Door-to-door ministry and passing out flyers. We don't have any youth right now. That's a good one. Starting this for the first time, so nothing to report, but I can say apathy is the biggest issue. Being new to this branch, we're just starting now. We have a young adult ministry, YAMS. They meet sporadically, and usually it's for the purpose of socializing. With a little funding, they can do something to serve the community. The Sabbath School class, brunch between Sabbath School and worship service, special events, concerts, game nights. Afternoon AY programming, music style put in leadership positions without discipleship. Youth groups, we've tried youth nights and clubs. We've tried stuff that will keep the youth interested. That's pretty generic, but yeah. Given responsibility, but they fail to show up, just like the adult members. Sorry, I had to throw that out there, but it's real. Somehow we're not connected because they're not engaged in the church's activities. They just come on a sporadic basis. We've tried socials, encouraging young adults in the youth, young adult ministry to build relationships with newcomers of the same age group, encouraging collaborative work with the older generation to build church growth. We haven't tried enough. That's the problem. Many of them are not ready to be part of the ministry because schedule, work, priority of interest, etc. Try to do Sabbath school in the adult style. We've given them tracks. Oh, that's helpful. No, we just started the young adult group just now. Okay, what do you think the biggest reason they failed? Boy, don't you like starting out with failure? This is good stuff, y'all. Not enough interest. The leader wasn't supportive. Our community is composed of W3s, wealthy, well-educated, and worldly, and middle-class citizens. They are automatically turned off by anything involving religion because they consider it unnecessary and irrational from an academic standpoint. Also, door-to-door solicitors are so common that people are hostile toward anyone showing up their door uninvited. In past experiences, our biggest obstacles have been a lack of support from elders and church members who had strong opposition to change, as well as a lack of or ineffective training and support from leadership. They are a talented group of young people, but their ministry is not supported by the church as well as other ministries are supported. Their events are not on the calendar. There's no line on the tithe envelopes that allows people to give direct support to them. This is the group that should be our focus. They are at the marrying/childbearing age and could bring to us the next generation of our church family. One of the biggest reasons we failed is hurt feelings. not attractive to their mentality. There's a lack of interest of the young adults, a lack of experience, style, training. We have not enough involvement, unsure of oneself. I'm not sure, they just put don't take responsibility serious. I don't know if you call it we don't or they don't. Both. We'll leave it open, okay. Don't know. That's fair. Lack of young people. We ended up relying on events to bring youth in and lacked relationship to keep them in. They rather rely on themselves to do things better than working with others for a lighter load and even experiencing burnout. We ended up caring about our growth advancing independently, which split church attendance and performance, making a clear differentiation between youth flourishing and the general church flourishing. Created an unhealthy internal competition in the church and made the older generation feel displaced. Nothing was followed through. We're still exploring. No connections. They are impersonal. Nothing yet. So, having looked at all that, how do we get into what can really help? First of all, let's look at a couple of myths. See if we're working here. It would help if I turned it on. Yeah. There we go. Now let's try. Myth number 1. The upcoming generation isn't really spiritual. You know how many times I hear this? At churches I go to, they're not really spiritual, not interested in what we're doing. Well, those are two separate statements. Understand that just because they're not interested in what you're doing doesn't make them unspiritual. Because what you're doing may not be spiritual. Oh, we're getting some amens in the house this morning. I'm glad y'all are here. I hadn't even gone to meddling yet. All right. The reality is they're very spiritual. As a matter of fact, last weekend I spent with about 350, 400 high school students down at Camp Kalakwa at the Southern Union Prayer Conference. And you have never seen a more spiritually aware and focused and passionate group of young people as was down there. And these kids, when they prayed, they prayed. We had special times of prayer for special things, and the prayers that came out of their mouths were just absolutely intense. The reality is they're very spiritual, and they're passionate about their walk with Jesus. In fact, I'd say that many of them are more passionate than some of the adults at the church. But that commitment doesn't look the same as it has in generations past. They don't typically show it by being the first to the church doors on Sabbath morning. That's because they aren't necessarily looking for a place where they sit and look at the front without any input. They want to be involved in an experience, not just spectators on a bench. This is important. They're looking for a place where they can belong, sometimes even before they believe. See, we've gotten really good at saying, here's the path to baptism. And if you can sign your name to all of these things, we'll baptize you, and then you're a member, and then we just leave them alone. So we've had a very clear-cut path to baptism for years. After that, when they come out of the waters get muddy. We have to have a clear-cut path to discipleship. One that shows them what it's like to live for Jesus. One that shows them what it's like to be passionate in a relationship with Jesus. And if we don't, they look at us and go, well, you told me all this stuff, but I don't see it. We're going to talk about that later. Myth number 2. If we just preach the truth, they will come. You wish. Thank you, Monique. You're bearing me out right away. That's awesome. See, when I was growing up, a long time ago, I know I'm old, and why an old guy gets to work with young people, I'll never know. But I'll tell you what, I leave these things really, really tired, y'all. But when I was growing up, this was the main thrust of our evangelism. We must prove that we have the truth. And then once we do, they will realize the truth has implications in their lives, and then they'll readjust their life to be in line with the truth, or else they must openly reject the truth, at which point we can shake the dust off our feet. I'm just being real, y'all. Are you tracking with me? This generation doesn't ask that question, is it true? The question that we have to answer for this generation goes beyond having truth. It goes beyond proof texts and discussions. The question this generation is asking is, does it work? And if I don't see it working for you, why would I want it? If they don't see it working in the lives of those who claim to believe it, then they reason it must not be truth. Are you tracking with me? See, if your children, your youth, your young adults don't see a group of people growing more loving, more joyous, more peaceful, more kind, more filled with goodness, more faithful, who are more gentle and more self-control, they compare you to what you say you believe, and they conclude that whatever it is you're selling is not the truth they're seeking, but just another cosmetic cover-up for whatever ails us. See, we've preached truth with a small t. That's Twitter-worthy right there, y'all. I'm just saying. We have preached truth with a small t. We have to make sure we are both preaching and living the truth with a capital T, as it's found in Jesus, who said, I am the way, the what? Truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That means we have to be a people who first and foremost run to Jesus. Being authentic about who we are, and always in the process of allowing the Holy Spirit to change us, to become more like Jesus. I didn't say we're perfect. None of us will be this side of the kingdom. But we can ever be growing more like Jesus. See, it's true that Jesus accepts you just the way you are, but He loves you too much to leave you that way. He's going to change you to be more in His likeness. And if our churches aren't becoming more like Jesus, more filled with the fruit of the Spirit, more peaceful, joyous, loving, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, if you don't see more of that, guess what's happening? You've bought into a club. If the fruit of the Spirit is not evident in your congregation, let me say at the outset that you have little hope of attracting, engaging, and mobilizing young adults for the kingdom, because they won't stay where Jesus isn't. Have I gone to meddling yet? This is the preaching part of this whole presentation today, so that's what the opening remarks I get to flat let loose, and then we'll back off and we'll be friendly. Young people are looking for a life-giving, grace-filled, authentic community where they can belong and contribute and be accepted, warts and all. Isn't that what we're all looking for? So how do we create that within our churches? Because some of y'all are already thinking about your church and going, oh, man, isn't that the truth? But we can't budge them with a 20-foot lever. That's what today is all about. I'm glad you came. We're going to answer that question today. What can be done? Mobilize isn't so much about style of worship or having the hippest, coolest church. It's about helping churches develop the mind and ways of Jesus to be inclusive, encouraging, warm, and welcoming. It's about an attitude more than anything else. And this attitude can fit with any style of worship, be it traditional or contemporary. So don't go back and say, the conference says we have to change our worship service. Now, if the young adults in your church say we need to change the worship service, you probably should listen to them. But don't go back and say, Pastor Don thinks we should change the worship. No, I'm not talking about worship styles this morning, because I've seen the attitude of Jesus take hold in any worship style. So let's not confuse the forms of worship with the function of a Christian. So, before you think you have to go back and change your church to be more contemporary, just relax. It's not necessary. However, what is necessary is actually harder than changing worship styles. Oh, thank you, Pastor Don, for that encouraging word. We're talking about changing the whole church environment or culture to be a place that draws in rather than repels. All people, but especially young people. But wait, before you run out screaming, it's impossible. Just give us a chance, okay? We got a full day yet. That was the bad news. Here's the good news. All you have to be responsible for is you. Aren't you glad? That's a little bit easier. Even though some of y'all are saying, man, that's going to be hard enough.
Simple but not easy.
Yeah. You got it. All you have to be responsible for is you, and you can do this. You can become a change agent in your church and over time end up impacting the entire church culture. See, this whole thing, and I'll tell you more about how Mobilize came to be. We had our first one anybody here last year? We didn't call it Mobilize last year. We called it a name that nobody understood. So we had to change names. I'll tell you more about that later, but it was called the Young Adult Liaison Training, and everybody went, what the world is that? That's not for me, I'm staying away. And so you did. So when we did evaluations, I said, I think the name is killing us, guys. Let's get something that's more what we're looking at. But the idea is, you can't change the entire church culture, but you can change the experience for one person at a time. And that's what this whole thing is predicated on. But that change suddenly starts getting noticed. So how did that happen? Well, that's what the rest of the day is about. Hold on for the ride, get ready to discover, and in some cases rediscover some principles that can help you do that. Now, we've chosen today not to take a, quote, normal route, because, first of all, those of you who know me know I'm not normal. Somebody asked me the other day, how you doing? I said, if I was any better, I'd be twins. And nobody would like that, especially my wife. She goes, no, there's too many. Don't do that to me. So this isn't going to be a normal seminar. You're going to have plenty of time to talk with those people around your table today. You're going to have some upfront stuff. We're going to have some table discussion stuff. We're going to have some walking around stuff. Okay? It's not going to be normal. And we're not going to give you a whole lot of Bible texts that you've heard before and tell you should go back and put those into practice and you'll be fine. While that's true, if you would apply the Bible principles, many of us suffer from heard that all before. And we leave these things, these training events, with more guilt than what we came in with. And I remember going to some incredible training stuff, leaving depressed, thinking, that'd be awesome if that would work in my church, but it just won't. So we've chosen today to take an end run at this thing by looking at some practical ideas that really have their basis in scriptural principles. And by the way, if you're looking for scripture in today's stuff, I quoted one. You'll find them in some of these posters around the wall. That's the scriptures this is based on today. So you got to read them for yourself now, y'all. That'll come later. One of our activities. I don't know if you know who Ken Blanchard is. Anybody ever heard of Ken Blanchard? Have you heard of the 1 Minute Manager? Most people have heard of that. Ken Blanchard wrote that. He writes a lot of business books, but Ken Blanchard is a Christian. And Ken Blanchard has this, one of his books, one of my favorite books he wrote is called Lead Like Jesus. Incredible book. He's a Christian author. He's a corporate promotional speaker who specializes in taking biblical principles and teaching them to corporations as stellar ideas. Isn't that cool? He takes biblical principles and he extracts the practicality from them, and he goes to the corporation and says, now, if you want to do this, you've got to be a person of character. And this is how we build. And he takes biblical principles, never tells them it's from the Bible. He's got corporations paying him $10,000 and $20,000 at a pop. I got to learn to do this, y'all. But he wrote a little book. Well, actually, let me tell you about another person, Barbara Glanz. You ever heard of her? Anybody heard of Barbara Glanz? That's because you guys don't hang out in the corporate world, I guess. But she's also another corporate speaker who also happens to be a Christian and does much the same thing as Ken Blanchard. And she and Ken Blanchard actually teamed up to do a small book for business leaders that took the biblical teachings on serving others and translated them into business language. Isn't that brilliant? It's called The Simple Truths of Service. You got that book back there? Yeah, Nate's got it back there. Hold it up, yeah. It's just a little teeny book. So, before you guys think that Nate and I are just brilliant people, we've borrowed and adapted from that little book. So, this is really cool if you think about it. Here's a guy who took biblical principles, put them in the corporate world. We're taking them from the corporate world and put them back in church. Anyway. So, not the totality of our time, but as a basis for starting our discussion on changing culture. So we're going to start with a video clip from Barbara Glanz, and she tells a story that forms the reason they wrote this little book, The Simple Truths of Service. So watch this video clip and see what you think. Oh, they won't stay with Jesus. Man, I got ahead of myself, didn't I? Man, that was good stuff. Here we go. You'll have to read because I didn't want to buy the $687 version where they told it. So, how can you be a... Y'all can dry your eyes now. It's all good. Doesn't that get you, though? And if you watch the movie, it really gets you, but I didn't want to pay $687 for it because I don't have corporate rates. You don't go around. I don't have the corporate money. I got the point across. So how can you be a Johnny in your church? How can you put your personal signature on every Sabbath morning? Every gathering of your church that will make it special, giving people, especially young people, a memory that will make them want to come back. Be thinking of that as we move on through the day. If you still have Slido open, you can go to the top of the page, and where you see one side says polls, the other side says questions. As we go through the day, if you've got a question on any one of the, we'll have MC1, MC2. It'll just follow that way as we re-log into different ones, switch events. If you got a question that comes to mind during that particular portion, you can go up to the top where it says polls, click on the question side, and it'll say you don't have any questions at this point in time. Okay, so the first question comes in, and I'll show that on the screen. Why choose Sabbath for this conference? Because it's when fewer people are busy and more people are interested in ministry. That's why. So you see how this works. Now, here's the cool thing. You see the little thumb over there? Once I approve it or Nate approves it, it'll show up on the screen. There gets a whole bunch of questions there. Once he approves it, it'll show back up on your phone. And if you like that question, you say, that's the question I was going to ask, just hit the little thumb, upvote it. And as it gets upvoted, it gets moved up the list. So if we run out of time, we'll answer the top ones first. So that's how that works. Isn't that cool? So if you've got questions, you can type those in any session. You can click on the questions button, type your question. Once we receive it, clear it, it shows up on your screen, and you can upvote it. So, do we have any other questions right now? If not, see how we're running with time. We'll move on to our next. We're right, pretty close. So we're going to clarifying expectations. Now, at the top of your screen, you'll see the little bars right up there. If you click on that little bar thing, you'll see down in that little line that says switch event. See that? Hit switch event. Now type in, or you may be able to see a bunch of, if you don't, if it says the code, type in MC2. Do you see it? You're still in questions. Go up to here, push that one, switch event. And you had MC2, does it say MC2? That's pre-session still. Okay. You may have to go all the way back out to the beginning of it and type in MC2 in the new one.
You can pick up to 3.
What's that?
You can pick up to 3?
Yes. So, just take that poll real quick. Okay? About done or taking a little longer? It's kind of cool to watch those things change in live real time, isn't it? I'm glad that 6% of you are really honest. Was 8, but somebody changed their vote when they saw it on the screen and said, no, I can't say that. Oh, now it went to 11%, yeah. So 9% are really honest about skipping church at home. That's good. Glad you came to Mobilize to skip church at home. So let's move ahead. I have a passion for lost and missing people in this age demographic need better tools to reach them more effectively. 82% of you came for the right reason. Good. Of course, you had two other options, but to learn to serve this upcoming generation better, to find at least one practical thing I can take home and apply at my church, to seek to understand the young adult landscape a little better, to skip church at home because I figured this might be better and I thought I would take a chance. I hope we can fulfill that for you. Pressure is on now. All right. To figure out where young adults are trying to take over the church and figure out how to head them off at the pass. And I only put that on there with half tongue-in-cheek. All right. The one concept that I hope you cover today is how to reach the youth, how to encourage and disciple young adults in a motivating manner, practicability, boy, it's changing here, motivation of young people, adults in our church, how not to be afraid of serving and giving all I can, how to pull young adults that have already left back into a young adult ministry, and we went off the screen again, so let's go over here and look at it. Personal testimonies where you have seen these principles applied and where young people and or churches were transformed, that's coming. How to present young adult issues to the church board in a way that immediately gets their attention. How to create cultural change. How can we deepen our experience with God so that it shows? Great. Acceptance. I want a clearer idea what to do to help my church grow. How to be innovative in our church community. Young adults who grew up in church and decided to leave. I want to learn how to inspire young adults. How to reach out, help them provide for their needs and the needs of others, ways to attract young adults, outreach in the workplace, and the last one is simply how. The one concept I hope you will cover today is how. That's good. Wide open, but good. Okay. I could tell you how to do a lot of things. Okay. If I could change one thing about my church, how my church cares for young adults, it would be to get the church to understand that without them, there is no future in the church. Amen. Which is exactly what drives me to do what I do. Young adults be heard and taken seriously. I wish my church could, being happier when they come to an event other than church, but not to church service. That we'll say some more about that one. Building community for joy, transparency, and growth. To provide more freedom and accessibility to those of us who are passionate and willing to serve this demographic. Yes, don't you feel like sometimes you get a straitjacket placed on you? We want to elect you to be young adult leader. Now, here's your guidelines. Don't breathe. Involve them more in the worship services, the importance of community, minimizing the criticism of them, learning how to love them unconditionally, get more involved from the church as a whole, not being critical, love, involvement, appreciation, to be more involved. Boy, involvement keeps showing up, doesn't it? As it should. The story of Johnny the Bagger inspires me to use Interlink Ministry as a platform to inspire people to do the same in hopes that a community can develop and go to heaven together. Do something, quote, small but meaningful to show love. Love a life focused on inspiring others. I think they meant live a life focused on inspiring others and letting them, I love this kind of lives too, letting them know they have value. Do more of the little things every day. Just do something. Make a difference. Cry a little. Inspires me to cry a little. Me too. Look for ways to touch people's hearts. Make better memories. Step out and make a difference. Reach out. figure out one thing I can do differently, think of doing something special that will affect all the church, do better at my job, show more care. Man, great stuff. Great stuff. So as we look at those clarifications in ministry, it comes to how well do we mobilize? How do we mobilize? And so based on this book, Simple Crews of Service, let's work at this. When we talk about mobilizing young adults, I want you to begin to think not in terms of what you can get out of them. As in, let's mobilize them to do the work. Now, fortunately, if you mobilize young adults, that will be a byproduct. But that should not be the focus. The problem with that line of thinking is that most of them will see through what you're saying and see it for what it is. That is a chance to push off onto them the things that no one else wants to do. Think Pathfinders here. The poor Pathfinders are always given the jobs no one else wants to do because they can earn a patch for it. I remember as a Pathfinder, when it was time to go out for evangelism series and pass out flyers and brochures and handbills and so forth, we'd all meet at the church. They'd hand all the Pathfinder stuff. You'd have about 10 drivers. They would load all the Pathfinders up, and we'd drive off and leave the adults in the church while we went out and handed out. And basically, we figured out pretty quick that we were doing what nobody else wanted to do, which made us not want to do it. So mobilizing for the kingdom will indeed involve them in the body life of the church and in growing in their own discipleship. But before any of that would come the ideas, there are 3 words on that sign there. What's the bottom? To attract, engage, and mobilize. Now, we think of the last one with mobilize because we took the last one and made it the conference theme. Okay, I get that. But if we're going to start with that first one, attract, okay, and engage, we would have to learn from the example of Jesus. And his example showed us that it is in serving the needs of others to be the first step to attracting them. Which reminds me of the ministry of healing, the quote that Ellen White had, Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. And you could put reaching the young people, because it's true of all people. The Savior mingled with men as one who desired their good. So, first step to attracting is you have to desire the good of those young adults. It's not about you, and it's not about your church looking really cool. It's about you desiring their good, which gives me hope because you're here because most of you said you desired their good. Man, I'm glad we have the A students here today. Where are those D students? They should be here. No. We'll not go there. I desire their good too. He showed his sympathy for them, ministered to their needs. So he desires their good, he ministers to their needs, and, are you ready for this? Won their confidence. See, we try to do too much without winning confidence. In order to gain a hearing, you have to first listen. You got to spend some time. After all that, then he bade them follow me. See, we have this thing in the church that the answer is always Jesus. They got a whole bunch of questions. It's like the story, the guy who was telling a children's story, and he had all these children up there, and he said, now, children, I am thinking of something that's gray and small with a big bushy tail. Can anybody guess what it is? This kid goes, oh. He says, I know the answer is Jesus, but it sounds like a squirrel to me. Jesus said, you will seek me and you will find me when you what? Search for me with all your heart. But here's the problem. We want to cut their search short. We've already done the searching. We know better, and so we're going to tell you what to do instead of allowing you to search and actually helping you with your search. Does that make sense? We just say, hey, let me help shortcut you and save you all the trouble. Here's the problem. Unless kids struggle, they don't realize the value. And unless they struggle with the problems of life and find Jesus to be the solution for themselves, they don't realize the value. If you continue to shortcut it, say, Jesus is the answer, Jesus is the answer, Jesus is the answer, say, you know what, that's a tough question. Let's go looking for the answer together. Let me help you search. I told you this is extremely practical. Sorry. I'm just trying to break it down for my mind. Going on with the quote, there is need of coming close to the people by personal effort. Not personal ease or comfort. Just thought that's my words. She said, personal effort. If less time were given to sermonizing and more time were spent in personal ministry, greater results would be seen. And she finishes by saying, accompanied by the power of persuasion, the power of prayer, the power of the love of God, this work cannot be without fruit. So, in parts 1 and 2 of this Mobilize conference, think serving young adults. Because as you serve them, they will respond with enthusiasm. So though each of your blanks in your little notebook starts with mobilizing young adults, because it fits with our theme. We were just kind of being, we're so thematically based, I couldn't break away when I did the deals. My bad. It fits with our theme. You can actually also read that serving young adults is whatever. So if it doesn't make sense when you say mobilizing young adults, then fill in the blank. When you fill in the blanks, substitute the word serving, and I think you'll find it make more sense. With that, let's jump in. Mobilizing young adults, and I have to get it to the right one, inspires stories. Now this one makes more sense if you say serving young adults inspires stories. I pastored, before I came to the conference office, I pastored the Georgia-Cumberland Academy Church for 15 years. That's an interesting church to pastor because it's a hybrid church. You have 3 congregations in one. You've got students and their needs, you've got faculty and their needs, and you've got community people and their needs. And guess what? Hardly any of them line up. So you've got 3 different things. And when I went there, I was the 5th pastor in 6 years. That's not a whole lot of stability. One elder looked at me and he said, I'm not sure how much to invest in you. It's like, excuse me? He says, well, I don't know how long you're going to be here. I looked straight back at him and I said, I'll be here longer than you. And I was, just for the record. And I remind him every time I see him. I look at him and he starts to talk and say, I'm not sure how much I want to invest in this conversation. Anyway. When I first went to the GCA church, there was a culture in place that matches much of the cultures that I find in many of our churches around the conference. The culture was this, in essence, while they didn't say it out loud, the culture was, now kids, you just sit there and watch us do this, and when you're old enough, we might allow you to do this too. What's the problem with that culture?
They're blind to their own condition.
You guys are so good, you're already defining a whole lot of different problems with that. See, there's tons wrong with that idea. Here's the worst of it. They won't stay around until they're old enough. Exactly. They're saying, well, if you want to stay there and keep doing it, y'all have at it. It's your church. Go ahead, I'm out. And they vote with their feet. We'll see another Twitter one right there. Hashtag dropping dimes. All right. All right. Y'all thought I was out of touch, didn't you? Oh, yeah. Dropping dimes mean pearls of wisdom, y'all, older people. I just wanted to make sure you were in on this because that's the new lingo. He was dropping some dimes on us right there. If it really gets good, you drop quarters. And I was talking to some kids at Southern one day. We were doing a little round table discussion. I started telling, and one guy, oh, he's dropping Benjamins. I mean, I went to the hundreds right there. I said, whoa, I have arrived. I'm dropping Benjamins now. So anyway, that was just a little side note I threw in for free. So we set out to change the church culture very intentionally because I knew that unless the church came to understand the fallacy of their thinking, we would have no kids there. And please understand, in most churches, change does not occur overnight. Let me give you some good news and bad news. Large ships don't turn corners sharply. Plan for a long time. It took 6 years to transition the GCA church. 6 years. Now, that didn't mean we didn't see changes all along the way. But when you start into this thing, be ready and willing as you turn the wheel into the turn to hang on. Because everybody will come and try to wrest the wheel out of your hand and turn it back the other way. This is why this whole personal empowerment thing we're talking about, you can't change the whole church culture, but you can be a Johnny the Bagger. And you don't need a church board vote. Hallelujah. Doesn't even have to be discussed. You can say, this is what I'm going to do to put my personal signature on our church. That's the cool part about this whole approach. You don't have to have a church board vote. My church board will never let me. Well, don't. If God called you to do it, He supersedes the church board. I'm just saying. So, it comes slowly. And most churches, unless they are in super dire straits and they're going down and this is a last-ditch effort, they'll try anything to survive then. They'll change all kinds of stuff quickly. But most churches haven't come to that point yet, so plan on change coming slowly. We began at GCA to take immediate steps to change the culture. We began to value kids not only in our speech from the front, but in our actions as we began to interact with them and then began to include them. First, it was helping with the Sabbath school departments. I had a teacher go to a couple students that said they kind of hung out like kids. Will you come help me with the Sabbath school? Doesn't take a church board vote. Unless they're standing there drinking in front of the kids. That would be another thing, but you know what I'm saying. The board, we began gradually working them into every board and committee of the church. Matter of fact, when I left, the church board had 7 high school students serving on there. and 2 young adults. We began blending the worship service as we listened to the students. Again, listening to the students. And began including some elements of praise music along with our hymns. I wanted to make sure that we had a hymn every week with the organ so they would know how to worship at other churches. Because if they go there and they don't see what they're used to and they go, well, I don't like this, I'm out. But if they're used to hearing an organ, they go, oh, well, these guys work with the organ. We worship. So at GCA Church, right now this morning, in about 20 minutes, they'll have a praise team on stage and then switch to the organ. Or they'll start with the organ and then go to the praise team. Sometimes the praise team and the organ do together. It's a blended service. You don't have to have an either or, it can be a both and. But the fact is, God can be worshiped. And so we began utilizing them on the platform during worship service. Gradually, we began identifying some of those with special gifts, and we put them on special leadership track, and we ordained them as deacons and deaconesses. And later, if they actually lived up to the calling, we ordained them as elders. They had to earn it. It wasn't like, we're just handing out elderships here. But there were some of them that led better. And by the way, I took all the elders off the platform in my church. There's no more platform duty for elders because some of them, quite frankly, are awful on the platform. I'm just being real, y'all. Sometimes you could have monkeys get up there and do better. Just because you're an elder. So I said, in order to be an elder in this church, you have to lead a viable ministry. Your ministry might be to take care of the church building. You're going to be the elder of plant maintenance. I'm good with that. I'm going to put you over the deacons, and you guys take care of things. You might be the elder for women's ministries, the elder for men's ministries. You might be the elder for Sabbath schools, children's ministry elder. I don't care what it is, but in order to be an elder in this church, you have to function as a leader. Which, by the way, if you read Scripture, that's what elders are supposed to do. Not just call for the offering. Don't get me down that side road. Anyway, students we found could do those things and were just as passionate about their spiritual walk and just as passionate about leading and serving as were the adults. And I want to hit this one right away because somebody said up there, well, they're just not reliable. Folks, don't put that on kids. That's a people issue. If you are alive and breathing, you've not been reliable at some point in your life. And some of you still can't be counted on to be there at the church every time the door is open, nor should you be expected to be. That's why we have a community, so you can share the responsibility. Now, do they need to be taught responsibility? Yes. I'm not saying don't teach responsibility, but provide them with a way out. Don't just leave them hanging. Now, the first time a kid didn't show up, I was calling them. I'm holding them accountable. Hey, Pastor Don here. What happened Sabbath? Oh, well, see, my parents came and they want to take me and my girlfriend to. So, well, that's cool, but you left us hanging. Oh. So, can you watch the schedule a little bit closer next time? If this happens again, I'll be calling you again. Happens 3 times, I'm going to take you off the board of elders. What happens? They show up. You began training them to be more reliable. By the way, that works with older adults too.
But Pastor Don, if you're going to make a phone call afterwards, can you not make a courtesy call before?
They didn't make the phone call to me. I had to call them.
Right.
But I didn't know they were not showing up.
Right, but I'm just saying, they're on the platform and that's their thing. Help them to be more reliable. I'm going to call you later and say, why didn't you show up? I could call you on Thursday and say, just want to make sure.
Well, that happens.
Yeah.
In other words, my secretary was sending out emails to every one of them. The problem is, a lot of them weren't checking emails. So, some of them don't even text. But anyway, let's not go there. We got to keep moving. what happened with this culture change is they began to tell stories. When they would go home for home leave, hey, guess what I got to do for church today? Hey, guess what I got to do last week? Do you know that I'm part of the sound team now? By the way, if we didn't have kids on the sound team, we couldn't run all the technology in that church over there. I'm just saying. It's pretty intense. They got live streaming and everything going all the time. But here's what I noticed happening. As the stories circulated, parents brought their students to investigate for themselves, and many students decided they wanted to be a part of a church that allowed them to serve alongside the adults. Now, notice I said alongside the adults. Here's the big fear. We think we got to step back and just give them our stuff. Well, there you go. No, it's about family. You know, at the Thanksgiving table, there's room for everybody. Now, some of us have to sit at the kids' table. My wife still makes me sit there, but it's more fun over there, I'm just saying. But there's a place for everybody. And in the family of God, there needs to be a place for everybody. So you don't just kick one group to the curb while you make the other center stage. You say, look, how do we take this thing? How do we blend this? How do we make it as we approach this together? And so we developed the idea of making sure that we kept a blend on the platform. Not all students, not all adults, but a blend. And we made it just as normal for a kid to lead the morning prayer while an adult told the children's story as we did to have a kid doing special music. So we try to keep that blended up. Now, some weeks you have it more heavily adult, and that works. I mean, it happens. But as the stories began circulating, and with the school that was already doing amazing things and continuing to do amazing things, we put together a winning combination. So the recruiters at GCA started making the church one of the stops on their recruiting tours on campus. Matter of fact, some recruiters said, we make that our last stop. Because we walk them into the sanctuary, we sit them down in the back pew, and we say, let me tell you what happens with your kids here. And as they told stories, often they would tell me the kid and the parent would sit there and grow more and more excited. And by the time they were done, they would say, if that's what's happening here, we want to be part of that. Where do I sign? See, serving young adults inspires stories. And stories attract attention. You begin to put your personal signature on Sabbath, that will begin to attract attention. And stories begin to happen. And when stories begin to happen, other young adults will be drawn to those stories. Moving on. Mobilizing young adults uses outside-of-the-box thinking. Some people don't even know where the top of the box is to get out of it. But it has to look different to solve the problem. Because obviously what we've been doing hasn't been working. And they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. So it has to look different. We're not going to solve the swinging back door problem until first solve the thinking problem we find ourselves locked into. We've thought down the same old rut for so long that we can barely see outside the top of the rut. So how do we get those new ideas? Obviously by coming to Mobilize Conference every year, because we're doing this every year, 4th week of January. Okay, because we're going to be adding new things every year, but there's a faster, more focused way. You don't have to wait once a year, okay. Whew. But I'll tell you the faster, more focused way, we don't really like this way because we aren't good at it. And it takes work. But here goes. Listen. That's it, listen. Intentional listening. Especially to those in this age group that you're seeking to serve. Because as you listen, you will hear more outside the box thinking than you can handle. And I'm not saying that you have to do everything they suggest. Please don't. Your church will be an emotional yo-yo. But there's typically one or two things that you can take and run with. The idea, actually, for this Mobilize conference came out of a thing that I do with Southern students. Somebody here, Southern. Y'all, okay, let me tell you, once a month I come to Southern, I go to Raphael's, and any Southern students that want to come, I just pay for your supper. So make sure you're hooked in before you leave. You got to be a student at Southern. I do it for ACF groups too. But once a month I go to Southern and I call it Raphael's Run with Pastor Don. And you come in, you order whatever it is you want, and I pay for it, and then we sit down. And we talk, and I listen. And some of my best ideas for ministry have come from Raphael's Runs with Pastor Don. I love it. It's a great way to go because you get great ideas and you eat pizza at the same time. That's a win-win. No. I've started getting just a few pieces, and I let them eat the rest of it. But anyway, so I'm sitting there at Raphael's one evening, and typically, most of the time it's how's your classes, and they're all talking because sometimes you'll get, the most I had was like 56 one time. We had the whole one side of Raphael's packed out, and everybody else kind of cowered in the other corner, in the other room. No, don't go in there. And there's one old guy with a whole bunch of college kids. It was fun. Sometimes we only have 5, but I don't care because I just want to listen. Intentionally, and by the way, I found if you throw pizzas down, kids will tell you just about anything you want to know. Just a little inside tip there. Any kind of food, really. Any kind of food works. It doesn't have to be pizza. Some people don't like pizza, but there's, you can, Oriental, Mexican, you throw it down, they'll eat it, and they'll tell you. If you ask questions, you have to be intentional at listening, which means that you intentionally throw out a question of the night, which oftentimes I'll say, sometimes it's so harried and wild at the very beginning, I don't get to throw out my question of the night, which is something. But like, what have you tried at church, or what are you wanting to see from church that you don't currently see? Well, one night, 3 girls stayed by afterwards, and they said, Pastor Don, we have been looking for a home church. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there's 23 churches in the Chattanooga area. I said, well, how many have you been to? Well, we've been to 9. 9 churches. And? Oh, they're nice people. I said, nice people. Yeah. We can't seem to find a church that suits us. I said, what are you looking for? Well, we can't find a church that has a clear-cut, discernible path to involvement. Did you catch that? Take that one idea and run with it. You'll have some gold right there. We can't find a church that has a clear-cut, discernible path to involvement. All the people are nice, and they seem like they're happy that we come, but it also seems like they would be just as happy if we didn't come, because they're just happy people. But we can't really find a church that feels like they really want us or need us. So, to stir up your pure minds and help you get started with outside-the-box thinking, here's the question you need to write down and think about later, because we're going to keep moving. What would a clear-cut, discernible path to involvement look like in your church? That'll keep you going for a while. We got to keep rolling. Mobilizing young adults is a choice. No one can make you serve young adults. And nor can they make you serve young adults well. You can throw something down and say, well, there we got something for them. There you go, that's good enough. And by the way, our churches are plagued with the idea of the good enough. You have to intentionally do things differently. It's a choice. Recognize it doesn't just happen. You don't accidentally get there. And sometimes serving them will look totally different than anyone might expect. Years ago, I was a youth pastor in a very large church where I had 75 kids in my youth group. And most of them came from fairly wealthy, or at least upper middle class homes. None of them really knew how others had to scrape just to get by in this world. And the affluence in those homes was killing their spiritual desire. And so as I took stock of where they were, I thought, man, I've got to do something to open their eyes. So I began praying about ways to capture their hearts, and I began asking questions and listening. And so one kid said, well, you know, there's a homeless guy I go by all the time. We could take him a sandwich. There's a start. So one Sabbath afternoon, we made a bunch of sandwiches, and we drove downtown. We started handing out sandwiches. Well, that went really well for about 3-4 weeks until what we didn't know just about got us killed. And that is, we were only feeding. Did you know that homeless people also run in gangs many times? See, I wasn't aware of that back in the day. So we're just feeding one homeless gang because we knew where they were. We're there feeding this one homeless gang, and all of a sudden they said, you guys need to get out of here. And weapons began to come out. I'm like, what? Kids, get in a van. And up the bank, down by the river, here comes this other gang, and they have weapons out. Homeless gangs. They had a place called Shantytown, and they all lived in Shantytown, but different parts of Shantytown. And we had been feeding one part of Shantytown, but not feeding the other. And suddenly the cops began rolling in, saying, get those kids out of here. We drove out amid a flurry of bullets. And I said, I cannot take somebody else's kids back down there, knowing what I now know. The Lord delivered us from our ignorance. And fortunately, the church van did not have a hole in it. So I said, okay, now what? But I saw that suddenly their eyes were beginning to be opened, their hearts were beginning to soften. And so the other part of this was that we were still in their hometown. We were on their turf. And so they would go out and do their thing, and then they'd come back, and it was like, okay, we've now soothed our guilty conscience. We've served. I can go right back to my lifestyle. So I thought, well, we need to do an intensive here. Now, this is back in the days before mission trips became the thing. I'm an old pioneer, y'all. I've been doing youth ministry 38 years. I started in youth ministry, and that's youth, young adult ministry, children's ministry, all done for my entire career. The Lord called me to it very definitely. That's a whole another long story, but He said, you're not going to be a normal pastor. And I said, thank you, because I'm not normal anything. But so I heard on the radio as I was driving, there was a need because they had a flood in eastern Kentucky. They needed groups to come in and help them reconstruct homes. And so, long story short, I began taking kids to East. I had to beg the first 14 to go with me. I even paid their way. And they weren't from the more affluent homes, they were from the poorer homes. But when they got back and began telling their friends what a fun trip they had, it began to pick up speed. I began the Appalachian Mission Project in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, and I got more stories there than I can tell you. We worked on low and zero income family homes. In Bell County alone, there were over 600 zero income families listed. Now, they're listed as zero income, but they do have the cash crop. So we had to go in late October after their marijuana growing season was over. And again, I've had shotguns leveled at me up there. More stories than we got time for, but once they got back, they began telling their stories, and more began to want to go. And over the course of 28 years, I led about 36 or 37 trips into the Appalachian regions of Kentucky, North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, and I saw those trips impact almost 3,000 kids. And by the way, let me deal with the money issue here. We don't have enough money. God does not have a money problem. His people have a vision problem. Hashtag nailed it. Dropping dimes. In the 28 years I did the ministry, I told God right back 1990 or so, I said, God, I don't have time to be fundraising all this stuff and trying to be a pastor for all these kids and try to do all, I don't have time for that. So I prayed one of those dumb prayers. which seemed good at the time. I said, God, I don't have time for this, so if you want me to keep leading these trips, you have to send the money. And here's the dumb part of the prayer. As long as you send the money, I'll keep going. Hence the 28 years. In 28 years, I spent over $940,000 that the Lord sent. Don't tell me that you got a money problem. If you got vision for doing God's work in God's way, He will send you the resources you need. I've seen that over and over. I can tell you story after story after story. A guy handed me a $35,000 check. I was taking 130 kids at a whack, working 10 job sites simultaneously. Needed $35,000. I can tell you stories after story. $11,000 check, $35,000 check, $25,000, $100,000 check. God doesn't have a money problem. We have a vision problem. And if we can get the vision, God will supply the money. Outside the box thinking helps us reinvest in the lives of young people. This whole thing brings me to the next point. Mobilizing adults starts with a clear vision. God doesn't have a money problem, we have a vision problem. We vision far too small. Sometimes we don't even know what we're visioning. When I started the Appalachia thing, I never intended to go 28 years. By the way, it's still going. The Lord finally released me to hand it off this year. So Josh Woods, who's a chaplain at GCA, was a student there when I was pastor there, and we were taking him up there. He came back to be chaplain. He said, man, I'd love to do that. I said, good, it's yours. He said, well, no, I didn't mean that. I want to take kids with you. I said, great, let's do it. And then it's yours. This last fall was the first year I didn't go on the Appalachian mission trip. I took him up there. I introduced him to all the people I know. Helped him find job sites. We drove home. I said, have fun. And then on the week of, because I know in my heart I would want to be back up there in the middle of it, because it's been my thing for the last 28 falls. October, it's just Appalachian mission time. You know, I knew I scheduled myself so heavy that week I couldn't go anywhere. I made sure that even if he called and said, oh, can you please come? I'd say, I can help you from here, but I can't come up there. He didn't call. Anyway. It's kind of depressing. But anyway. But I did get a full report every day. He was sending me pictures, and I was going, oh, I feel better. And they did a great job, and he ran it perfectly so. One of the reasons our churches rarely do anything that attracts young adults is that we're satisfied with the good enough. We stop too soon because we feel like it's too much work, or someone complains because we're doing something out of the ordinary. It doesn't seem like anything is ever going to change. But to attract, engage, and mobilize young adults, you have to clarify the why, and then the what, and finally the how. We always start with the how, or the what, but we rarely talk about the why. Now, when we began the process of transition in GCA Church, we started with why. Why do we need to make a change? The answer to that became obvious as we prayed. God was allowing us 1 to 4 years to impact the lives of young people. And He sent them to us. See, the church, when I got there, was still trying to reach out to the Calhoun community. And I was saying, you've got a church 2 miles down the road. That's their job. As we captured the vision, God was telling us, you train these kids and you send them out to change the world. You're going to have more impact if you focus on these students for the short time I give you and build them into disciples and send them out and then let them go. Do you know that kids that came through GCA today are serving in our conference? We've got at least 5 pastors that came through while I was there that we sent out, we trained and sent out. We got one sitting right here, graduated 2003. I don't know where that came from, but that was good. Because some of those years get all blurred. He's here today to learn to do more ministry. We train them to do that. Matter of fact, our vision statement, as we distilled it, became the GCA church family exist to capture the hearts and minds of young people and disciple them, train them to be fully devoted disciples of Jesus Christ. So everything else flowed from that. That was the why. And it became the what. So as we began looking at that, we determined it was a fairly serious mistake to ignore the calling of God and the mission He was calling us to try to do the same thing we've always been doing. The calling was too obvious to deny. We're sitting on an academy campus, for crying out loud. And the young people at the end of their time at GCA would leave either to impact the world for God or to go about their own business or getting on with life. What made the difference was what we chose to do with it. If we chose to do nothing and do church as usual, they'd just get on with their lives and go about the thing. And they might have a few good things that say, well, I think we should. But in actuality, when we began to get busy with the business that God was calling us to, we found they began to impact the world. We now have doctors, nurses, teachers in this conference that came through GCA that have a missional mindset. And I see them all the time because in young adult ministry, that's what a lot of them are, still young adults. And so as I go around the conference, I keep seeing them at different churches. Brian's wife was one. She would have been here today, but they have too many kids now. You got a real young one. But Allison, still deeply involved in ministry at Peachtree City. So the GCA church family exists to capture the hearts and minds of young people and develop them to fully devoted disciples. Then came the how. Everyone had ideas on how to do it. You ever sat around and think, now, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Except so many ideas don't necessarily bring more focus. Sometimes more confusion. So we decided we needed a structure to filter the ideas through. We went back to the what. What exactly do we want to make sure they know? What skills do we want them to have? What things do we want them to be in command of when they leave here? So we decided there were 5 things we wanted to teach kids while they were at GCA. And we hit these from all different angles. We want to teach them how to worship. What does it mean to worship God in spirit and truth? We wanted to teach them how to study the Bible. How do you find those answers for yourself when there's not a pastor on the phone? We wanted to teach them how to find their place inside the church and learn how to serve there. You know, we do very poorly with that in most of our churches. We don't help people find how God put them together and learn how to serve in that capacity. If we did, our churches would be a lot more functional. As it is, we put the fun in dysfunction right now. A lot of churches. Don't hashtag that one. Don't send that out. We wanted to, we want to teach them worship, study the Bible, how to find their place in the church and learn to serve there, how to serve the community around them. That 4 is how to go out to their community and learn to serve there. And then 5, we want to teach them how to have fun in a Christian setting, which means that we had to redefine the word fun to show them that Christians can have fun in a lot of different ways that don't have to incorporate some of the ways that are destructive. It doesn't have to be an either or. Now, once those 5 things fell into line, we now had a structure to filter ideas. Now what? And if it didn't hit one of those 5 things, we didn't do it, as good an idea as it was, because if you're not doing one of those things that helps you move towards your goal, you're wasting time and resources. And none of us have an unlimited supply of those. So we began looking at those and working those out. My goodness, how am I doing on time? Way beyond time? Or am I okay? I'm still good. Oh, sometimes I amaze myself. So, if it didn't help us meet it, we didn't do it. And the whats began to fall into line. We wrote our statements of intent. In other words, we looked at what we wanted to do, and we said, like in the very first vision and statements of intent, we had the vision, we exist to capture the hearts and minds of young people, and then we began statements of intent. We looked at areas of need in the church, and we wrote statements as if they had already happened. One of the original ones, when I first got there, we worshiped in the chapel. We had no big, huge, nice, but our statement of intent was, we worship in a large, roomy facility designed to lead all who enter to the foot of the cross. That was our first 5-year part of it. We had 10 statements of intent. And we began working towards those, because if you can vision those things, if the vision is clear, you can articulate it, you begin working towards it. By the end of that 5 years, guess what? We worshiped in a large, roomy facility designed to lead all who enter to the foot of the cross. That even impacted the design of the church. There are so many subtle crosses in that building, I didn't know it. But our architect took that line and ran with it. There are crosses just about everywhere. Even the windows have crosses that you don't really see until you start looking at them going, oh, that's a cross. One kid told me they counted over, I think it was 90 crosses in the church that are all subtly there. So it's designed to lead all who enter to the foot of the cross. Somewhere or another, they're gonna come to the cross. Now, as you look at those things, and you articulate the vision, you clarify it, you articulate it, you can then begin moving towards it. But because we have buckshot vision, we often have buckshot results. Some hit, some don't, and we either care or we don't. Last one. Mobilizing young adults requires that everyone catch the vision eventually. Now, you will always have early adopters, those people who are rah, let's go. You'll always have those who are middle adopters. You'll have those that will come kicking and screaming. And sometimes the only way that everyone adopts is you have a few good funerals. Sorry, just being real. I'm not talking about people. I wanted you to think that, and you did. I'm talking about sometimes you need to pray for the death of someone's influence. We went to Quarters or Benjamin's there. I don't know. That was good. Sometimes we've had people in power for so long who have the hardening of the attitudes. They're stuck in place. They will not, cannot be moved. I was at one church, young youth pastor, 1,100 member church out in the Northwest, and this guy had been in place for 40 years. And the board asked me to come and present my plan for youth ministry. They gave me about 3 months to develop it, and they wanted to hear it, so I went and right away he began protesting. And even against his protest, my plan passed by a narrow margin. And on the way out of board, he pulled me to the corner of the room and he says, I don't care what we just voted. This will happen over my dead body.
Uh-oh. At least he says it to your face.
So I was a young pastor in those days. And I didn't have as many filters across my mouth. And some of y'all wonder about my filters now, I know. And before I could stop myself, I know what I intended, but it came out wrong, okay? What I was intending to say was, I need to go back to the Lord in prayer on this. What I said was, well, now I guess I know what I need to pray for. When he had said, over my dead body, I said, now I guess I know what I need to pray for. He looked at me like, what? I said, no. What I meant was, I know I need to pray about this plan more. Yes, you do. He spun and walked out of the room. I began praying, Lord, I believe this is a plan you've given me. I believe this is what needs to happen in this church. We need to build a new model for youth ministry, which, by the way, in the last 20-something years has stood the test of time. And that model, which is based on principles, rather than those 5 principles, by the way, are in place at that church, continues to be a model church for youth ministry, youth young adult ministry in the Northwest. Because that model's in. So I said, Lord, I believe that this is a model you've given, that you want to. I said, so I don't know what to do, Lord. So you need to either kill his influence or something. And that's where I first got this idea, pray for the death of influence. And so every time he would see me at church, he says, it's not happening. Don't even think you're going there. I just said, I'm still praying about it. 2 months later, he found out he had cancer. 3 months later, he died. And those things that we were praying about, we did over his dead body. But don't pray for that. I'm saying you can pray for the death of influence.
He was Pharaoh in that case. It wasn't you.
I didn't cause it.
He didn't know he was prophesying.
I actually went many times to the hospital to visit him. I just want you to know, and prayed for him. It went well. We became friends before he died. Because he realized, and he actually apologized before he died. So it ended good. Well, as good as you can when you die. But anyway, but the Lord took that, and I've seen the Lord in many churches when I've had to pray for the death of influence of people that have held on for so long. I've seen the Lord move them out of the way. Not necessarily having them go to their rest. Of course, this guy was 90, so it was okay. But anyway, I got myself way off track. Sorry. There will always be early adopters, middle adopters, late adopters, and those that you can't get to adopt. But the vision needs to be so compelling that everyone chooses to adopt it, or they risk losing influence with the rest of the body. That is, if it makes sense in your context, people will eventually see that it is compelling, and it is sensible, and it is based on Scripture. And yes, I believe that's what God is calling us to do. Those who don't and find they can no longer win a majority will typically remove themselves and go somewhere else. You will most likely have some bumps in the road with people getting upset, but the clearer and more compelling the vision, the more people will adopt it, put their shoulder to the wheel to accomplish it. Okay. Whew. Questions. Go to your question thing in Slido. You can type those in at the top of the page. And Nate, are you ready to... Has this been helpful, by the way? Yes. Good. I don't want to waste your time. I want it to be profitable. Oh, man, the questions are popping in now. I'll give you just a minute or so. We got about 8 minutes before we have our break. Question is, there we go. Question is, how are we defining young adults? And I meant to do that at the beginning. Typically, we're defining young adults as after high school, starting at age 18, going to age 35. That's what demographers are currently saying. So you have and part of that umbrella is we have collegiate, which is 18 to 23, and then 23 to 35, which includes the young professionals and young families that begin, couples, and then young families all in that demographic. So we're talking specifically about ages 18 to 35. However, these principles are ones that I learned working with teenagers. So they do apply. You can apply those to high schoolers, yeah.
Real quick, just so everyone knows, you can like other questions, which if you want to see them on the screen, those that have the likes, you'll be able to see on screen. Otherwise, it'll just be on your mobile device. So if it's a question you're hoping some conversation will take place about, you need to like that question.
Okay. So I'm going to start answering these, and then on your thing, you see the little box beside the question? You can archive those. So as I answer the question at the top, just take them off the screen. That will help me. Okay. Some young adults are away at school. How do we plan for when they have vacations? That's a great question. I think that one of the ideas you can do, obviously when they're home for the summer, you do more. When they're home for Christmas break and so forth, there can be a few things done there. For the most part, you can be the church that gives support from a distance. There's nothing cooler in this electronic digital age than going to the dormitory and finding a box that has food. You know, when you come in and suddenly it says, hey, we're thinking about you, we're praying for you, please let us know how to pray. We wanted to make sure that you had something, and you become that church that does support care packages, they're going to be more interested in coming back to your place than less. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's just one. Do you have an outline of 12-step program for us to take back to our church? I don't. Sorry, they're online though. I don't have a 12-step program for young adults. Maybe I should create that. That's a great idea.
That's for the older church members.
12. I think I'm going to leave that alone. Okay. How do you reach public school young people? Hey, by the way, one of the coolest things going that we do as a conference every year is our Oasis Public High School Retreat. Happens next weekend. And Monday is the cutoff. So if you know public high school kids that need to be there, call Alyse, A-L-Y-S-E, at the conference office and get them registered. Because it is a great event for public high school kids. One way to reach them is get them to, it's at Cohutta next weekend. I'll be out there too. One of the best ways that I found to reach public school kids in your church is find out what they're involved in and show up. I had a kid that was in theater. She loved doing drama. I told her, when you have a play, let me know. If it's not on a Friday night or something, I'll be there. And so she would give me tickets to her Sunday showings, and I would show up. My wife and I would show up. Just showing up, it's a presence ministry. You don't have to have the right words to say. You just show up and say, it says, I care enough to show up for you. And one of the best ways to reach high school kids is just show up. Find out what they're involved in and show up whenever you can. Okay? Why not do this conference at a local church? That's a great question. As a matter of fact, we probably will be doing this conference twice more during the year at some local church because we have such a big, huge region. We're talking about possibly in the fall of this year. The calendar is already full for this year. So we're try to slide one weekend in, probably in the southern region this year. You guys want to host?
There you go.
You want to host?
Yeah. All but one on our board is here, so let's take a vote. Hand to stay and run the sound system.
Nate and I are committing to try to do one extra one at a local church somewhere in each of the regions. Next year, 2020, we're going to do this one in January. I'll give you the date for this one next year before we're done here. And then one in the fall, probably in the northern region. If things go well with that by 2021, this will become the big one, but we'll have one in the northern and the southern. So we're moving that direction. So thanks for that question. Great one. How do you deal with the rejection of an idea besides prayer? I get what you're saying now. I thought the only idea they'll accept from me is praying. That's not what you're saying. What's that? Jesus is the answer, but it sounds like a squirrel to me. Anyway, ideas are always rejected by somebody, especially if it's a new idea, because new ideas are of Satan. That's what some people think. It's not been done this way. It's been one of the biggest lines to kill ideas.
Yeah, he's not that creative.
He's not. Yeah. That's why they keep using the same line. The devil's not that creative. It's not been done before. It works because we buy it. And so when I hear it's not been done before, I said, then it's our time to do it. One of the things that during the break we have here coming up in a little bit, I might as well tell you this, is that there are some really good sayings on these posters. I spent hours actually making these, and they're all the way up and down the halls, they're around. One of the ways to deal with rejection of ideas is to find one that really, or two or three that really speak to you and write that down. And whenever it comes back to that, just go back to your notes, look at that, and be encouraged. Not everybody is against you. You got one conference young adult ministries director. One of the things you can do is call me. I'm happy to field phone calls unless it's 3 o'clock in the morning. It better be an emergency. We have resources, we have pastors around that can actually help you stay encouraged. But you can also help you stay encouraged. And one of the things that you're going to do in the afternoon break session is find some people, maybe the people at your table that you talk about things with, that you can actually swap numbers with. Each of you get different ones and swap sayings. Now there's texts, there's sayings, there's different things that can help encourage you. That's why I put them around. So when we go to our break, go around and find 2 or 3 that really help. Okay, how did you transition from all hymns to incorporating praise and worship songs? Slowly. It was really funny, actually. I did not know when I began pastoring GCA that no one had ever played the guitar during church. They had only played guitar during Sabbath school time, but it was forbidden in church. I did not know that. And somebody said, we understand that you lead praise time. I said, yeah, I do. We don't have anybody to lead our praise time this week. Now, praise time for them was, at the time, was mournful hymns with piano and organ only. Bless their hearts. I mean, I think they meant well, but the kids were sitting there just going. And the only time they had life was when let's stand for the opening hymn. So they asked me to do praise time, and because I couldn't find anybody, so I said, oh, okay. So I went there early. I set up my guitar. I've got an acoustic electric. I plugged it in, had it set sound system. I put it on the stand, and I went out to go to Sabbath school. When I came back, there's a group of adults. I walked in back to the chapel there, and they were saying, whose guitar is that? Who's going to play guitar? I was standing behind them. I didn't say anything. I'll let this one ride. We'll see what happens. Came time for praise and worship. I stepped out from behind there, picked up the guitar. They went, the new pastor. Now, I had picked a very mellow set. It wasn't, as the deer pants for the water, those kind of songs. So I had picked that set, and the kids actually sang. And one of the older members met me on the way out. She was on the music committee, and she said, well, that wasn't as bad as I expected. I said, well, how bad did you expect it to be? Well, I saw that guitar plugged in. I thought, we're going to have a rock concert in here. I said, is the liability covered by the church insurance if you intensely involve youngsters? Yes. Yes, as long as you go through the proper channels, and if you have questions about any particular activity, call Rick Claus here in the conference office. Disciple for everyone, even longtime members, because I believe until we are disciples, our church will continue to be dysfunctional, especially for the young. Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Matter of fact, one of the reasons I'm doing Mobilize Conference, one of the reasons we've defined this thing is to help you answer the calling of Jesus on your life to become disciple-making disciples. That's the whole point of this day, is to help encourage and train you to be better disciple-making disciples. How many churches in our conference? Why are less than 10 represented here today? About 160 in our conference? I don't know. I did everything I could. I put it on Facebook, Snapchat, not Snapchat. I don't do Snapchat. Instagram, Twitter, in our newsletters. We've had it on the conference website. I've written to all the pastors at least 4 times. I've called people. I've texted people. And you guys are the winners. Congratulate yourself, yes. How do you incentivize church leadership in youth and young adults? You don't incentivize, you build relationships. Relationships always incentivize. When you build relationships, I will do things for friends of mine that I would never do for an incentive. Oh, we'll give you a $25 Walmart gift card, big deal. I'd just soon go there and pay for it myself. But if I build relationships and I say, hey man, can you help me out? When it's your turn, I'll help you out. Because friends do that. I'll do a lot more for friendships than I will for incentives. But that's what I'd say, relationships. What if there aren't any young adults in our church now? We're going to cover that in a little bit. But you know what? It's a great question. You're going to talk about this in your table discussions coming up. I would bet, even if you don't have young adults in your church now, you have young adults in your community. And if you go back to Christ's method alone, find out what those young adults need in your community and begin working there. And if it means you start at the high school level and grow your own, great. If it means you start at the elementary school by going and doing readings to those elementary school students, take the long view, you can build young adult groups by starting and moving through with them. Again, it's relationships. How do we do youth programs when families' time and transportation is a problem? There is so much technology available now that you can do relationships and Bible studies online. Zoom is a great tool that's free if you only got 5 to 8. I do Zoom with groups of sometimes 12 and 15 and 20, so I have the Zoom Pro, so I can go up to 100. But youth programming isn't what youth are really actually looking for. Yes, they want activities. What they're looking for is relationships and authenticity, and those can be done by simply texting, hey, I'm praying for you today. Now, at certain times, when you know they're going to be there, hey, this Saturday night, we're going to have this event. And so you plan that. Don't try to overplan and just do program. Programs aren't what gets you the kids. It's authentic relationships. How do we get a hold of young adults that have already left? You change things in your church, put your signature touch on first, then you re-invite them. When I was at one church, we had 123 young adults between the ages of 18 and 25 on our books that were no longer attending. We had 4 young adults attending. So you have 123, 4. And those 4 kind of felt like, what are we doing here? And so I said, okay, guys, what do you think we need to do? They said, we don't know. I said, well, I read this stuff by this guy named Billy Graham. I think he knows a little bit about evangelism. And Billy Graham said that 60% of the people they surveyed that had left church said that they would return if they were simply invited. So I'm a real simple person. I said, I can do that. So we took this 123 kids. We said, okay, well, let's be sure that we're clear on what's going to happen if they come, because we can't do the same old and have them say. So we built what we were going to do, and then we started on Tuesday nights. The 4 of us would meet. I would go with 2, one Wednesday night, and the other 2 the other next Tuesday night. And all we did was took 3 or 4 young adults that were on a list. We called them. We went to their home, knocked on the door, said, hey, we're just here to invite you back to church. We heard stories. We listened. We even said, well, that guy died, so you can come back now. Within 4 months, take a guess. How many? 72. Within 4 months. Now, what we found when they came was they had certain needs. There were some that really wanted fellowship. There were others that really wanted to dig deep in the Bible. That's okay. Guess what we did? 2 of those kids said, we'll take the fellowship group. The other said, oh, we'll take the Bible study group. So when they came to the church, hey, so glad you came back. What are you looking for? Well, we're really looking for fellowship. Right down here, let me show you this room. We never told them about the other group. We take them down to the fellowship room. Man, I feel a need to get back into the Word. Come right over here. Guys, 4 months. Just because we went and knocked on doors and said, hey, we want to invite you back to church. And we knew what we were going to do with them when they came. We actually planted a church out of that group that went on. I got to stop y'all. Sorry. I'm cutting into your break time.
When you said that you brought them into church and did that, was this during the regular Sabbath, Sabbath school, or during divine worship, or what?
Sabbath school.
During Sabbath school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then some of them would leave right after that. We said, that's okay. We're just glad you came. And then sometimes during Sabbath school, we give them invitations, come sit with us in church. One of the reasons that young adults don't come to church, they have no one to sit with. I've got a lot of anecdotal stuff that says, we don't want to come because I don't want to sit by myself for an hour and then go home. So if you want to put your personal signature on something, be a person that sits with young adults. That's hard, y'all. That's terrible. Hey, build your ministry by just saying, hey, come sit with me. Can you do that? Just about anybody can. We're going to stop there. Okay, we got a break. We're supposed to have 30 minutes. Boy, I'm glad I planned 30 minutes in that. 11:45, because it's 11, so we have 15 minutes now. We're going to come back and do some table discussions. We're going to reset things so you can actually, we'll be using Slido to guide your table discussions. When you come back, we got to reset everything here before you try to log into the MC3. But we'll try to get more of your questions later on this afternoon. If we didn't get to yours, I don't know how many we got on there because we were going as fast as we could. That's the last one. Oh, where does serving begin? With you. How do you explain the background clearance for those who work with children's ministries as longtime members? Great question. Call my daughter at the North American Division. She deals with it all the time. That's what I say. But no, you explain it by saying because the world has changed and we are in a suit-happy world, it's not that we mistrust you. We want you to know what everybody else needs to know. And if you don't know, and we have a new member that comes in, and they ask you, and you go, oh, this thing is stupid, then you're not being a very good example of being a family member. So just take the time and do it. That's what I do. Does that make sense? Okay, so we got more stuff. I think there's some more fruit and so forth there. There's hot drinks in the little kitchen there. Bathrooms are right up the hall. Guys, be to your right, ladies to the left. I know most of y'all found those when you came in. Take about 15 minutes. Find you some, go read the signs and see what you like that would encourage you. Write those down. All right, we'll take a break.